kind of be done. I mean, I didn't know I was going to be sad. I don't feel sad now. The sadness is overwhelming. I didn't want to come back. I mean, I couldn't come back last night. What? So is that the kind of thing when you spoke about crying every day, or as one's experience, since I'm honoring mine, is saying, my God, I'm sad. Am I sad for the world? Am I sad for me and all my life? Is that what you do? You let that go, and then I'd be a lot freer?
You did the right thing. You felt your sadness. Just be with it and let it flow. If you start analyzing it, why is it here? What is it going to do? That's the mind trying to make sense out of it and trying to deal with it on a mental level, and it doesn't work like that. Just feel it like you did and let it move and let it flow. It'll flow out of you and fully experience it. You fully experience whether it's sadness or anger or all these things that pop up. The reason that they keep coming up over and over again is that they're stored in the body in the form of charges. Who knows when that got put into you? As a child, maybe, or maybe as a young adult, or who knows, maybe even a past life. The content of the sadness is not important. The complete experiencing of it is. And Bhagavan says, when you experience it fully, and it's fully released, what comes is joy.
And yes, we did go through a lot of crying and laughter and just anger. I want out of here, I'm not coming back type of a thing. Yeah, but we came back. So because something was going on, I could feel it, and I came back because I could feel it changing, even though I didn't like going through the experiences. That's what I had to do before that.
And occasionally, people that go, or even all of us here, will be blessed with a state that's really a peak state, a very joyful, wonderful glimpse into what is happening and who we really are. And that's called an awakened state. It happens once in a while. It happens maybe more frequently in India, but it can happen anywhere to anyone. And it's a change in the brain chemistry that enables you to make contact with your divine inner self. And you be that, you feel that. And the chemistry will change back, and you get very angry that God took it away from you, and you start getting mad and saying things that are bad and wanting to leave. And you get some counseling and realize that that's a process, and it's a wonderful process. So you just take it as it comes and let it flow.
Awake means many things to many people, to religious scholars, people who study what that means through Buddhism and Hinduism in a rather orthodox sense. There's quite an array of powers that usually come with that. I recently studied with a modern and pretty famous contemporary Vedantic teacher where awake didn't have any of that going on with it. And in fact, it was quite difficult to discern if there was any distinction between the teacher and pretty much anybody you could meet that direct life. So I'm just wondering what you mean by them, because I was a little thrown by the term certified awake. Certifications usually pertain to the trained skill, which is very egoic, usually in the right sense, formula. So I just wondered if you could elaborate. I'm not so worried about your use of certification, but what do you mean by awake?
Do you want to start here and we'll just work down? Okay. Okay. First, were you referring to how we responded to her answer or question about feeling pain and joy and crying and all that? That's part of the process of awakening, because you have to clear out all the old stuff in order for the energy to come through. It's like cleaning out your drain pipes. All right, the more clogged they are, the less energy gets there. So we go through processes to bring that out. Now, after awakening, yeah, you still have those experiences, but we're not attached to them anymore. Not emotionally, not psychologically. They're there and they happen, but there's no one there having them. Does that make sense? The I is not there. So yeah, it is like there is no I after the experiences, but before that, oh, I was suffering. I was suffering. I mean, I will tell you, I was suffering. And after, I'm not suffering anymore, now that it's happened to me. Regarding the certification, the reason that Oneness University does that is so that we can come here with the Oneness organization and help transfer the energy, but also give you the teachings that we learned while we were in India. Now, there are a lot of people that are awakened and can awaken, and you don't have to be certified to be awakened. But if you want to be able to help under the Oneness umbrella, by having that certification, it tells people they came from the Oneness University, and that for sure they have been awakened.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
And I would, oh, I'm sorry.
The way they explain awakening is actually there's a neurobiological shift that has occurred in the brain. And that occurs through this experience called Diksha. Have you experienced Diksha?
I have.
Okay.
I've been to a number of them.
Okay.
And nothing. I mean, I felt nothing.
Well, I want to address that because there were times when I was receiving Diksha in India from really, like, God realized monks.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be sitting there thinking, I'm not really experiencing anything. I'm not really feeling this. This should be bigger for me. And the reality is maybe my conscious egoic self wasn't having the experience it thought it should. And then there were other times when all I could do was slide to the floor and not move. So the mind wants to understand, and what I understand from my own experience is this is not so quantifiable that you can really measure it from a level of mind. So things may be happening for you when you receive Diksha that you can't consciously register. It doesn't mean it's not having an impact. And I read something last night, and actually what I'd like to do is read it to the group again because I think it's helpful in understanding how this works.
Well, you know about Pennsylvania too.
So there have been a number of scientists who have studied and measured the effects of Diksha on the brain. And this is something, it's just one page, short, that a scientist wrote. And it says, during a recent stay at the Oneness University, I had the opportunity to measure the brains of several people at different stages of the Diksha process using a very sensitive electromagnetic sensor. At first, I examined participants of at this point it was 10 evening course that had already gone through 21 days earlier. All of them showed the brain patterns of enlightenment, or I would call that awakening. A greatly decreased level of activity in the parietal lobes and enhanced activity in the frontal lobes, with the dominance of the left frontal lobe. This is particularly important because the difference between genuine spiritual awakening and pathological mystical experiences that make a person more neurotic lies in the dominance of the frontal lobes. Overactivity on the right side is problematic, whereas a healthy integration of spiritual awakening into human life always comes with left frontal lobe dominance. These findings were also confirmed by another scientist, a medical doctor, who specializes in psychosomatic medicine, who scanned people with an ANSAT diagnostic device. We purposefully used two very different technologies to cross-check our findings. One very interesting aspect of these findings was that the brain hardware of these people was more reflective of permanent enlightenment or awakening than their current conscious experience. It seems that Diksha first installs the neurobiological hardware of enlightenment or awakening, and the software in the form of experience slowly catches up. This makes a lot of sense to me. So often people have access to great awakenings or awakened states, but do not have the prepared brain to sustain and integrate such awakenings. All the problems of ungrounded spiritual awakening have to do with this discrepancy. If the order is reversed, meaning the brain is prepared, it dramatically increases the chances of enlightenment or awakening being complete and easy to integrate into human life. So it's like there's a buildup of this energy. And I know people say, well, I didn't feel anything. Like I don't feel anything. But I can tell you, because I have had it tested many times since my awakening experience, if I've had one, that something significant has shifted in me. And the way I meet reality, the way I experience myself, the way I experience other people, the way I process pain or conflict, there's no suffering in it now. Doesn't mean I don't feel, but I feel really relieved and grateful that I'm not walking around with my mind constantly tortured by the next life experience I've had to undergo, you know. So you might not experience anything, and I would just add yet to that. And you know, if you're intrigued and you want to become awakened, or you want to be freer from your human mind, keep coming. You might not feel anything for a while. Doesn't mean it's not happening. Does that answer your question?
That's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to just add maybe a little bit to that, or just put in a different, come at it from a different perspective. The awakening, part of the awakening experience is that prior to awakening, your body and your mind are functioning, and your sense of self, that is who I am, is attached therein. You're attached to your thinking, and your thinking, because it's moving so quickly, pulls all these personality traits that we have in ourselves together and forms the concept of the self. So I am my mind, and I am this body. And yet if you try to find out or answer the question, who am I? It would be very difficult to find that self inside of yourself. So the self is attached to the mind and the body initially, and when you awaken, there's a disengagement of who you are from the mind. You actually are witnessing your body and your mind functioning, and you're in this awakened condition that has totally different characteristics about it. It's an additional state of consciousness. We have normally waking, dreaming, and sleeping. We're all familiar with those states of consciousness. This is an additional state of consciousness that we always have had, and you have right now, but you're not aligned with that. And when the shift occurs, there is a functional shift that happens in the brain through these processes that we're going through right now. When that gets to the right point, the divine is able to activate that, and there's a permanent shift away from the mind-oriented, false, illusory self to this permanent, wonderful, infinite, joyful condition, which is another state of consciousness that is you.
I just have a strong feeling that now it might be very helpful to explain further the certification process and how it is determined, you know, and certified. How does this come about at Oneness University?
There are a group of monks here that are in a very high state of consciousness. Basically in a oneness state. They're called oneness beings. And what they do is they meditate for a number of hours and get themselves deeply in tune with divine consciousness, which they're able to do. And they're able to then bring up the name of the individual that they're supposed to be looking at. They actually merge with that individual and make that determination. They make the determination on the basis of their own direct cognition from that level of consciousness. That's my best understanding. I don't know much more about it than that. But, and then they bring that information back. They're given lists of names. There's a bunch of them, I think, that sit around and have to all come to the same conclusion. And then they note that this person is awakened, this person is not awakened, but they will be awakened on such and such a date. That's my best understanding.
What would you say happens to your relationships when you become enlightened? I mean, relationships with others, your family, your friends, your work, your environment. I mean, what changes happen with it?
Can we clarify awakening and enlightenment? There's awakening, enlightenment, God realization. They're different states on a spectrum. Okay, we're at awakened. it's like 0 to 100. We're over in here. And if you're looking at enlightenment and God consciousness, you're looking way up in the hundreds. All right, that's when you're just fully there, in tune with the divine, like the oneness beings over in India are. And there's nothing that is not God for them. That would be enlightenment, God consciousness. We're talking awakened now.
How can you tell the difference?
How do you feel? Do you feel like you're absolutely one with that person sitting next to you? Do you feel her pains and her sour whatever? How do you feel? That's how you tell.
And we really can't tell you the answer to that because we've never experienced those great levels. They've been described, and I'll offer just a little description that may be helpful, as best as it was for me, and I can't relate to it anyway. But as we sit here now, we have a sense of our limitations. In other words, how far our body extends out and the like, right? You're sitting in the corner over there and I'm over here, and it's like that. In these very, very high states of consciousness, that sense is lost. Their sense of self goes beyond the boundaries of their body and incorporates the entire creation. Chew on that, I can't. I mean, way beyond me, but that's what's been described. And those are very, very high states. I think the more important part of your question at this point is how does it affect relationships? And we can address that from personal experience because we had a relationship before this happened and we still have one, and it's changed substantially. Not in the content of the relationship. She's still my wife. I'm still her husband. We still have our routines and our personalities. And the personalities are still interacting with each other. Prior to awakening, those personalities carried charges with them. They were loaded emotionally, ready to kind of jump out if somebody said this. Maybe anger would come up and I would be an angry person, and then that other person, she would respond maybe defensive. You know how these things go back and forth, and then now we can have the same discussion, the same back and forth, and maybe sometimes even experience a little touch of an emotion that comes up with it. But it goes right away. I mean, there's no negative charge left in that discussion. It's fantastic. We can actually laugh about, why did we even go back and forth about how you cook an egg?
It's getting deeper. It's getting, the relationship is actually growing and it's getting deeper. And it's subtle. It's very subtle how it's happening. But it's happening, and it's relationships with other people too, and with family. It does get better. I took my mother out of her box. I took my sisters out of the box. I put them in, and it's like I'm not relating with them the same way I used to relate towards them. And it's very freeing.
We've swapped out stress with joy. And that really is, by and large, I mean, it's not like that 100% of the time. But pretty quickly, if we do go down a little bit of a stressful path, it's just, the awakened consciousness doesn't cognize that very much. I mean, it just disappears. And what you see is the facts. Bhagavan has said that suffering is not in the fact. Suffering is in the perception of the fact. So how we perceive an event determines whether we and how we're going to feel and whether or not we are suffering with that or not. So if you see it from the perspective of pain and anguish, or it gives rise to that, that's being generated in yourself. Somebody says something to you. It's just a sound. It's just it's a sound. But how we respond, how do we respond to that sound? Like, you're just not a good person. Somebody says that. Well, we put the meaning and we put the content and we bring up all that anger and we bring up all that defensive mechanism. So our perception.
It's not the other person doing it to you.
Everything that happens in your life is your
Because
perception.
we're doing it to ourselves. It's not or anybody else.
I just want to thank you for bringing up this point. Do you feel what the other person feels? And I just want to give you this moment that I experienced many years ago in a rebirthing workshop, where after I went through definitely an enlightening experience, a moment, and I looked around in the room and it broke my heart. And I remember now that I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. My heart was not big enough to let it all through. So I cannot awaken unless I can let it all through. That's what I realized.
You're doing a beautiful job of it right
Yeah,
now.
really.
You feel that and express it in front of people. A lot of people wouldn't want to do that. They just, I'm not going to cry in public, but it's beautiful. That's
It
how you
took
do
me
it.
years to now I can sit and I can cry and laugh afterwards. I mean, it's one and the same almost. But there's more to go, I know. For everyone. But the main question I had is, I have a very hard time with asking for what I want. And from where you were and where you are experiencing yourself now, there is this, God knows, that's what I'm saying to myself, God knows. Who am I to ask for what I want? If I ask for what I want, then that I is brought in again. So I either surrender to that and allow and receive, or is that wanting still from personality?
We're not getting over our personality, and we're not getting over wanting. They talk a lot about the difference between craving and desire. And you're going to desire things. And if you have a God that loves you, the God that loves you is going to want you to have what you want. So you might as well let yourself want. And wanting doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. But, we need to put our order out. And if you want, like, you don't just go into a restaurant and say, bring me something to eat. You don't even say, give me a sandwich. You're very specific about how you want it and what you want. Right? So you might as well just take the risk and see what happens. And let yourself want. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, see, this is the ego battling with itself. Can you want without attachment? Then you're free. We all want stuff. It's just fine. It's part of being human.
Wanting without attachment.
I found for myself, it was at the recommendation of a guide teaching us how to pray and how to interact with our personal divine. And there was just a brief sentence that one of them said, be a child. And I did that. I was a child, because we all have our child inside of us, right? It's all